So, first speaker up we've got is Linn Murphy. I'm not going to read the full profile out of the program. You've all can read that yourselves. Linn is Programme Director, Policy and Regulatory for Land Information New Zealand, and her work involves bringing together a multidisciplinary group from access to NRS to facilitate improvements to the NRS information infrastructure. So, Linn, welcome, and all yours.
Cool. Anyway, firstly, thank you, Neil, for inviting me here. I did have to beg him to speak, but hopefully I've got a little bit of the puzzle that gives you some context around what's happening in central government around particularly natural resources information. I know that government can be a little bit opaque sometimes, and particularly in the information space, the opaqueness is not around keeping information close to government. It's more that it's a very fast-moving landscape, and even for those of us working in it, it's actually quite hard to keep up. So a little bit of context that isn't going to move too much. Firstly, we work in the natural resources sector in central government. For those of you who don't know what that looks like, the natural resources sector is a group of 7 agencies. They're the Business of MB, Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, and from that perspective, they're really interested in mining and energy, kind of in the natural resources sector arena. We have MFE, of course. We have primary industries, our ag, hort, and forestry. We have LINZ, Land Information New Zealand, where I'm from, and we've got all your geospatial and positioning needs. Department of Conservation, too noisy?
No, it's
not. Conservation, Te Puni Kokiri, of course the government's interested in Māori having their aspirations for their land reached, and Department of Internal Affairs, and they're there because they're looking after regional councils, and also they're in the information arena themselves. To bring all those agencies together, we work to a consistent framework because there are a whole bunch of competing interests in there. And it's evolved around a cycle of kind of like revealing relationships for natural resources as much as you can, establishing the drivers and understanding how they're all moving, giving advice to ministers on what policy options we've got, and then integrating it all into perfect advice. And that's the cycle that we use for some of those really difficult decisions, mining versus conservation, prioritising our conservation assets and how we use those, and our land assets. So this agreed framework, what you can see when you look at that is that actually all of the decision makers in this part of the process need good information. So particularly at that reveal stage, we need good information, and of course when you get to the end, you integrate it, you have to put it together. So that's how the Natural Resources Sector Information Programme got started, because of this realisation that you need the evidence sitting underneath it. So moving on in time a little bit, the NRS Information Directors were set up, and it's a group of people at third tier across all of those agencies and government, plus it's multidisciplinary. There's policymakers, information specialists, scientists, and because central government doesn't actually have all of the monopoly on knowing about information, we have Crown Research Institutes represented on there as well. We just kind of like wondered where to start. So we painted this picture, and I know you can't see it, but you should actually have a little bit of a soft copy, a hard copy on your desk. Basically, where we started was to try and paint a picture of the natural resources sector's information infrastructure. So this was new to me because I didn't know what an information infrastructure was, and now we've kind of got one. We know that it's not perfect the way we've painted it, but it's more the feel of the feel of the diagram that I just want you to get a handle on. So starting at the top of this diagram, we tried to understand who the decision makers were and what kinds of decisions they're making. And of course we have very small players making decisions, from farmers and fields right up to central government making decisions, and a whole bunch of other agencies, regional councils, local authorities creating policy settings that manage natural resources all the time. So we've got a really broad spread of decision makers up there, and that's kind of the top layer. The blue in this picture, I should say, are all kind of like some of the rapidly moving parts of it. So one of the rapidly moving parts at the top of this diagram is information to support environmental reporting, which people have already referred to this morning. Moving down into the next layer with decision makers, how do people use that information? And they use a variety of tools and models, one of which is the natural resources sector framework that I referred to, but there are a whole bunch of other data analytical tools that get used to help visualise people's decisions and actually how to make them. One of the blue moving parts in that second layer down is the valuing nature piece of work that the Natural Resources Sector Support Unit is trying to work out at the moment, and that's trying to work out a consistent framework for cost-benefit analysis. And that's really tricky. No answers there. And then starting from the bottom up, meeting in the middle, the bottom line are all of our data sets that we use, and there are thousands and thousands of data sets, and some of them are more important than others. And moving up the next layer, we've got various mechanisms for sorting out metadata. And then the next layer up are all the platforms that are out there. So this is the multiple platforms that are held, and it's not all of them, it's just a few of them. There's, it's loosely a federated data system. And this is the trick with getting the data out into the decision-making field is interoperability. And the next layer up is around kind of like things that are on the go to try and actually help those platforms to be interoperable. So that's kind of like a basic picture. It needs to be updated. Things are happening already. Lawa's in there somewhere. But it's all a very fast-moving piece. And so what we tried to look at as a group of multidisciplinary people was to actually work out where the really big problems are in this whole infrastructure that we could help with at a central level. And this is the overlay of hotspots. So probably just two I'll draw attention to are hotspot 1, which is the big circle at the bottom, and hotspot 4, which is the circle at the top left. Hotspot 1 is about standards and data models and data formats, and there's a lot of work on the go at the moment to work on standards. This is where I met Jochen Schmidt from NIWA, who's working on the biodiversity services stack and trying to implement standards. We have Rebecca McAtamney and Alison Stringer at MFE trying to do NEMS, the National Environmental Monitoring Standards. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And one of the key parts to this is that the hotspot is that we don't have actually anyone in central government helping to get standards agreed, get them cemented, and get them implemented. And so when we were sitting around in a multidisciplinary team, that was kind of like our biggest thing, and we know how big that is. Hotspot 4 is the other one I wanted to mention, which is that the landscape, the governance landscape, you need really good governance to be able to get all this to happen. And there's a bit of a gap in central government at the moment in how to get natural resources sectors information infrastructure on the agenda, make it cohesive, work out what needs to happen next in that space and get it supported. So, that's what we painted, for better or worse. Please, I'm not an information person, so I'm happy to take more feedback on how we should restructure this, but it's more the feel that I wanted you to get the hang of. And then this is where DIA comes back in, because the governance issue that we were highlighting for the natural resources sector is also playing out at the central government level. So DIA is the government's lead on information, and Colin MacDonald is the government chief information officer. He heads up DIA, and he has recognised that it's not just governance at lower levels that needs to be sorted out for information. It's at central government levels as well. And he has created essentially a structure where all of central government's information strategies will be fed up through four groups. The System Investment Group, which looks after ICT system investment, the Service Delivery Innovation Group, and that's more looking at government's relationships with customers, Technology Group, and an Information Group. Now, the Information Group is kind of like a new thing. It stems from a realisation that over, the last 4 or 5 years, government has been very focused on the technology part of ICT. And that's for a good number of reasons. It's difficult to get really large systems built within government. It's very costly, risks are high, and we need to be focusing on privacy and security and a whole bunch of things that really matter to the public. Less relevant for the NRS sector, which is a good thing for us. But so the information group has been set up in part a recognition that we haven't been focusing on information, and government ministers really want to be driving information out from out to the public as one of New Zealand's assets, and they want that to happen really quickly, which is kind of why everyone's feeling a bit of pressure. There's a handout also on your tables. I didn't get time to put that into my slides, otherwise I would have, but that's hot off the press. So there's you'll see this is the government's new ICT strategy and action plan. It was publicly released last Thursday, and this is just one of the slides from it, so you can go onto DIA's website and have a look at it and see, and have a read for it for yourselves. But you'll see in that diagram a bit of a refresh on a line item around unleashing information as an asset and renewed government interest in that area. So it's still unfolding. Okay, and the information group has been working on actually how it's going to work. And the first thing it looked at was actually how are we governing information at the central government level. And this is part of that fast-moving landscape. I'm sorry if you probably can't see it, it's from the back. It's a whole bunch of colourful bubbles and grey bubbles and blue bubbles. But the what we've essentially got is the coloured bubbles in the middle are some of the key building blocks of information infrastructures, and there's some government-centric words in them, I know, things like social licence, infrastructure, capability, culture, and policy and settings. And it's also just the vibe of this diagram that I want you to get the hang of too. The circular, the little ellipses around those 5 coloured bubbles are all the government's information programs that it's got trying to solve those problems. And you'll see that we've got a big cluster around the green bubble of capability that particularly the GCIO is working on. And we've got another big bubble around the purple infrastructure building block, and fairly light on the other 3. And those are all of government programs that are trying to work with every other single government agency, each in their own right. And then down on the right-hand side, we've got kind of a list of the clusters of agencies that are also trying to work together in the information space. And when you paint this picture, it looks really complicated. So the information group is just also interested in painting the picture to understand what we're dealing with, and then B, trying to work out how to align it all and make it work much more smoothly. The key thing, I guess the key thing to note is that they've picked up the natural resources sector information in the list down the bottom. And we've got some of the key new programs come up and running, the New Zealand Data Futures partnership, and we've also got the Open Data program in there as well. So the trick is trying to get all that to work together. But we are fully expecting, I guess, to have to see a bit of a refreshed emphasis on the natural resources sector information coming through this program of work. So the trick is to get ourselves organised and ready to be able to fit in with both the government ICT strategy and action plan, and also to kind of like service our own sector's information needs. So the info directors, and now we've moved from what is to what is possibly hypothetical. So none of this is written in stone yet, but the NRS directors group are trying to look at ways to solve the governance problem in the first instance, and also trying to deal with hotspot 1, which is the infrastructure-y type thing. And what we're thinking of is setting up a group at the deputy second tier level that sits in between the policymakers for the natural resources sector and the government ICT strategy. So we've kind of got a second tier group that's, we're nominally calling them this brown box in the middle, the NRS Information Leaders Group, and they'll be pulling things together to try and prioritise our investment needs, our resourcing needs, our connectedness needs, and our NRS Info Directors Group will be reporting up to them. In an ideal world, we would also have a technical body that sits alongside, also reporting into the leaders group, so that we've got not just policy people and a multidisciplinary group over on the right, but also some really good technical people on the left. And then it will be up to these guys to work out how we work within central government as well, and amongst all those other information programs. How am I doing for time? All right? Cool, because I've finished, if that's kind of... Whoops. So again, into the realms of possibility, not what's fact. What ideally we would like to do is to set up that leaders group, set up a technical information group, work out how to work with the GCIO and the partnership framework and all the other initiatives. Work out, when I say work out, how to resource things and get investment in things, we first actually have to work out how to identify priority information initiatives and how to structure all that, and then we can start working to kind of like resolve issues and connect up as best we can. So that's our wish list really, and hopefully that's a little bit of the piece in the puzzle for you all. Yeah.
Any questions?
The Information Leaders Group, when are you looking at setting that up?
Well, as soon as we can. This is not easy.
There's a group called the RMG, which is Resource Managers Group, which is essentially second tier regional council staff.
Yeah.
And there are a number of others who attend that as well.
Yeah.
that could be a really good forum
Yeah.
to start their conversation with,
Yeah.
to get contact at regional councils at that level.
Yes.
You're looking for.
That is excellent. Actually, so if I can backtrack a little bit, if you look at that blue fancy diagram, you'll notice that we haven't included regional councils and all of the information infrastructures coming up into it. We actually did that deliberately because we knew that MFE and the regional councils were working very, very closely together on the NEM standards and trying to get environmental reporting in place over the last kind of 2 years to 18 months. And we didn't want to have a new group of people dancing all around in the middle of that, cluttering up how that was all working. So fully, I would envisage that we have regional council representation somehow on that NRS Information Leaders Group, and definitely need to work out what connections we need to have with the Chief Executive's Environment Forum and all of those things that are happening. Yeah.
Any more questions around the room?
Can I ask, the consideration of sector groups being involved, sorry, Ian Morton from Bear Plenty. So the consideration of sector groups being involved in this is very government focused. I love the diagram that you've got, which is all about the outcomes and where we want to get to, which is community focused, New Zealand Inc. focused. Has there been any consideration as to how to involve them in the governance group? And also, this just shows the complexity and the issues that we've got. But how do we agree who owns what data so that we're not duplicating? Because I'm looking at this and from a regional council going, we duplicate a whole bunch of stuff that is being done elsewhere. And I think we all realise that, but how do we include them in the discussions? So sector groups, community groups, and basically decision makers in the future.
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that. Yeah. I guess we know that that's a really difficult issue that we just need to be. Yeah, Alison. Yeah.
I guess it also the thing comes down to a scope issue, because if you, and the reason why we're working as a sector, not as in everybody in government, is you're right, we do need to involve people, but if you start too broad at the beginning, you just end up going round and round and round in circles, trying to get agreement and when you're going to meet and what to do. So there does become a scale of the scope issue of actually getting things done. The difficulty then is to bring in all the people you need to in some way, and that's the 64 in the middle question. Any suggestions for this number?
Yeah.
Look, I just love to focus on the outcomes, and I think that's where we need to get to.
Yeah.
For me, it's not about driving to that, it's driving back from that. And how do we get to that? And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be involved because you can't be linked, but just how do we get to that?
Yeah.
Hi, Alex Kmoch from GNS Science. Probably a bit further down the line though, but how do you envision the execution or eventual implementation of those things? Do you consider the regional councils to involve, let's say, science or industry to do the actual implementation in the end, or is it rather within the councils themselves?
So sorry if I get the question. Yeah, the way we look at this information infrastructure is very, very broad. It's a very science-rich. It's a very science-rich information base. It's not just council data that we're dealing with. So we're acutely aware that the science. If you look at that diagram, the science community is a critical provider of data into the NRS information decision-making slot. We do have NIWA and Landcare represented on the NRS Info Directors group. I don't know if that answers your question, but you're from GNS, is it? Yeah. Yeah. So happy to talk. We kind of...
I mean, not only science, science, but also
Yeah. Again, no easy answer, no quick answer following it through to the end. We're at the very early stages of setting this up. Just for us, trying to solve the governance issue at the top is would be a really big win. Acutely aware that the business community are key decision makers, and the breadth of the NRS information infrastructure it's really broad. So we have not worked that out yet, and we're okay with that just at the moment. Yeah.
The diagram you have on here with all the squares and those
Yep.
Identifies hotspot 1 as taking up 50% of the sheet and says it's a problem area. There are aspects of that that I don't see as a problem, especially since in the middle there you've got all these potential solutions. My question is, how will this middle layer of things like Levi's browser, geoportal doc look like at the end of all the work that you're doing? Will there be less spots on there or more?
We have a loosely federated data system in the natural resources sector. We have some of it works really, really well. Other bits of it don't. And the way I see it working would be to pick out the bits that aren't working so well and to prioritise those first. So for example, you might pick off standards in a particular area that's really difficult for people at the moment, something like soils, for example, or that we need to kind of like really work on in depth. It might be working on technical solutions to solve interoperability across those platforms. That's where we take good advice, and we're really good listeners as to actually what the key issues are. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be on the panel later, so attack her again. So just like to say thank you.
Thank you.
I was just reflecting on that conversation and thinking that it strikes me that there's one hell of a lot of data out there to sort out, that there seems to be a need for an element of triage to figure out what matters most and maybe what data is going to deliver to some national objectives that data would be used for in order to guide where we should be spending our time on the different data silos. But anyway, food for thought.